Only in Edmonton, there is a fucking bus that takes up 2 lanes on a bridge over a damn lake!
Yeah. The Edmonton Warhammer Open, the largest official Warhammer event in Canada, is going to be a permanent thing now. Which means I have an excuse to play Warhammer regularly, and have an entertaining time to share with all of you. Even if the weekend was nothing but demonic crabs walking over everyone. This Open was a little special, as the Edmonton Open was the send-off for Warhammer's 10th edition, since 11th edition came out the same weekend. And this weekend both showed me the beauty and horrors of 10th edition, and yeah, Chaos should not have this high of a win rate ever again. Last year though, I had my Discord vote on what army I should bring to the Open, and they chose the Thousand Sons. This year, however, I did it again, but the options were Emperor's Children, World Eaters, Black Legion, or Ultramarines. My Discord then proceeded to vote Ultramarines, because you fuckers think you're funny, and I guess you wanted to see my tired customer service Gilliman at the Edmonton Open. Which I definitely felt like at the end of day 2 out of 3. However, the standard Ultramarine list is pretty boring. Usually it has 2 Repulsor Executioners and Victrix Guard spam. I'm also a broke-ass YouTuber and couldn't afford those units when they were available. I barely managed to get enough Victrix Guard to make the full squad, which then got me thinking, if we have budget Yu-Gi-Oh decks, Magic decks, and other things, then it was time to make budget Ultramarines! Using my custom chapter, the Wardens of Ultramar. My list was handcrafted by me and my friend to be something that could theoretically win? First, the detachment was Blade of Ultramar. 3 times during the game, I can activate one of these 3 doctrines, ranging from Devastator, Tactical, and Assault doctrines. These doctrines allow my units to either shoot after running, fall back from melee combat and still be able to shoot and charge, or run and charge in the same turn. However, you can only use each doctrine once, unless you bring Marneus Calgar. Marneus Calgar is the Ultramarines chapter master, and he's a bruiser. He allows the unit he's with to advance, shoot, and charge in the same turn. He also gives an additional command point for your army during your command phase. After that, people usually bring Uriel Ventress, as he allows you to redeploy 3 units in your army. But remember, we are on a budget. And luckily Space Marine 2 was on sale! So I brought Captain Titus, someone who people said were broken upon his release, but when you actually take a look at his abilities, he's actually fairly underpowered on his own. Titus gives his unit sustained hits 1, which is good if you want to chop up infantry. The thing people thought that made him broken, though, was his revive ability. If he gets killed in melee, on a roll of 2 or higher, he gets back up. If he hadn't fought yet. This is extremely situational, but it's funny if it pops off. Next, we have a Captain in Gravis armor, who I gave an enhancement to make his armor save a 2+, and give him a 5+ feel no pain. Essentially, making this guy a small Necron Catan, who can tank through the worst of it. I also made him to represent my friend, who couldn't come to the Open. So, Ramel, you're the GOAT, man. Thank you for the help with this army. Next, we have a 10-man Assault Intercessor unit to chop up infantry, a 5-man Intercessor unit to hold home objective, 2 Centurion Devastator units with las cannon missile nipples, a Predator Destructor with an autocannon and heavy bolters, 2 Gladiators built as the anti-tank Lancer variant, an Interceptor squad with Plasma Exterminators, an Incursor squad for their scout ability, a Land Raider Crusader because I couldn't get a Redeemer, and finally, my Victrix Honor Guard, who is the single most deadly unit in my army when led by Marneus. The Victrix Guard are an amazing melee unit. They have 5 attacks at Strength 5, AP -2, Damage 2, which is improved to 6 attacks at Strength 6 if you have a banner model leading them. Then, if you also have a character in the unit, they make it harder to hurt the unit with -1 to wound rolls against them. However, the scariest thing in their toolkit is the Surge move. For some reason, GW gave these guys the ability to surge. Should a Victrix Guard bite it, the unit gets to move d6 inches towards the nearest enemy unit. Now, normally you can't end a move within an inch of an enemy model, but with this ability, you can. You can lock down a lot of stupid shit with this, hence why it's a bitch to get your hands on Victrix Guard right now. The idea, however, for my army is this. Centurions and Inceptors hang off the board in reserves. The Centurions walk onto the board either turn 2 or 3 and take out heavy units that are camping in the back or middle lines, while the Inceptors land within 6 inches of an enemy unit that needs to die, or that I use the Space Marine's main ability, Oath of Moment on, so that they can reroll hit rolls against them. However, as I said, this is budget Ultramarines. A lot of the units I'm bringing are supposed to be doing the same jobs that my Victrix Guard and anything else that is in a standard Ultramarines list should be doing. The Assault Intercessors unit should have been another Victrix unit. The 2 Lancers should be Repulsors. Titus should be Uriel, the Land Raider Crusader should be a Redeemer, and the Incursors should be Scouts. The reason I didn't have them is that models either weren't available, or when they were, I was broke due to other life things. However, I knew for a fact that I wasn't reaching top 8 anyway. The goal for this list, like last year, was to go home with 1 win under my belt. So without further ado, let's get into this and the final 8 games of 10th edition Warhammer 40k. Quick reminder, a Warhammer Open works on a win-loss system. If you win 4 games, you will go up against someone else who also won 4 games. If you won 2 but lost 2, you will be paired up against someone who also won 2 but lost 2. However, wins only really matter when getting into top 8. The moment you lose 1 game before games 7 and 8, you're usually locked out of top 8 anyway, meaning what matters at that point is having fun and seeing how many points you can get in your games. If you lose a game but still manage to score extremely high, it shows how good you are as a player. My first match was against Custodes, and my opponent revealed to me that he was still new to Warhammer, which, you know what that means? A more laid-back and fun game. His army was led by Sister of Silence Alea, which is interesting because you rarely see Custodes use her. Next, he had 5 Custodian Guard units, 1 Alaris Terminator unit, 2 Witchseeker squads, 1 Prosecutor squad, 2 Venerable Land Raiders, and 1 Calidus Grav tank. And he was using the Talons of the Emperor detachment. Basically, if his sister's unit are near his Custodes units, they get a 5+ feel no pain against mortal wounds, and +1 to hit rolls. The first mission was Purge the Foe. You score points for killing your opponent's units, and you score more if you killed more than your opponent did in the round. I got the first turn, and our weekend officially began. I started my turn by going into the Devastator Doctrine. I quickly advanced my army up the table, and both my Predator and Lancer could see as Caladius, and my Lancer blew it up in 1 turn. It exploded on top of 2 Custodian units, Alea's unit, a Witchseeker unit, and a Land Raider. He quickly respawned on his turn by charging and killing my Incursors, then charged my Land Raider Crusader, which had Titus in it. The second battle round saw Titus and his boys get out of the Land Raider, while Marnius and his squad went to deal with the Custodes on my right flank. Marnius overperformed here, and just thrashed the Custodes squad with little effort. But Titus failed to make a 5-inch charge, meaning that on my opponent's next turn, he got his Custodes squad out of his Land Raider, charged Titus and his squad, and wiped out the whole unit. And although Titus didn't fight, meaning he could get back up on a 2+, I rolled a 1, meaning that he stayed dead, though the Crusader refused to die. So the middle was held by both my Gravis captain and the tank. Battle round 3 is where my opponent just lost all steam against me. I brought in my reserves as I had my Centurions hanging off the board with my Inceptor squad. All 3 units came on the board and they quickly began to tear into his remaining tanks, though my Inceptors failed to hurt a Custodian unit and got killed by the remaining Land Raider. He also did drop his Terminators, who took my home objective, but by this point, Marnius and his squad wiped out a Witchseeker unit and another Custodian unit. And by turn 4, Marnius and his squad were just cleaning up anything they touched. They secured the middle for me, and then pushed into my opponent's deployment zone. It was a brutal back and forth, but I came out on top with 67 to 56. My opponent was a guy named Stefan, and if you're watching this, you did amazing, my guy. You were super chill, and although we had the stress of a clock placed on us, you were awesome, and I hope to see you at the next Open. Now, let's get into the next game. Who are we fighting next? Really? Again? Alrighty then. So, Game 2's mission was Hidden Supplies. For this mission, there are 6 objectives on the table, with 2 being in the middle of the board. You score points for controlling objectives, scoring 5 points for 1, 5 more points for 2, and 5 additional if you hold more than your opponent at the start of your turn. My opponent was running 2 Blade Champions, a Shield Captain and Terminator Armor, Trajan Valoris, and Inquisitor Draxus, each with their own Custodian Guard units. A Calidus Assassin, an Alaris Terminator unit, 2 Warden squads, another Custodian Guard unit, and 2 Witchseeker squads. Surprisingly, there were no tanks. But this was a pretty beefy army. Those Warden squads are harder to hurt if they're led by a character, and my opponent has Blade Champions leading them. He got the first turn, which he really didn't want. All he really did on his first turn was push up, which moved him in the range of my Crusader to drop off Titus and his boys. Finally, time to redeem yourself, Titus! Titus successfully charged a Blade Champion squad and a sister squad, and he proceeded to do only 1 wound with over 48 attacks coming from the unit. Then he and his squad got wiped out. Kinda starting to think I should have brought a lieutenant over you, dude. Aside from that small hiccup, my army was performing pretty well. Marnius and his Victrix Guard proved to be the bane of the Custodians' existence again, with any unit they touched just evaporating. And my tanks were blowing away the Custodian Guard pretty well, which was made even better by turn 3, with my Centurions and Inceptors coming in to clear out remaining problems. The only real problem left was Trajan, who has a nasty ability to ignore hit roll modifiers, and once per game, can give himself either 12 attacks or a 2+ invulnerable save. This meant the only good unit to throw at him was Marnius and his Victrix Guard, who had taken kind of a beating at this point. It also doesn't help that Inquisitor Draxus wiped out 3 Centurions by herself, and I had to prioritize my Inceptors to finish her off. So Marnius and his squad were on their own to deal with Trajan and his Guard squad. But going into the Assault Doctrine and popping off the stratagem Courage and Honor gave Marnius and his unit Lance, which is +1 to wound and +1 AP when they charge. And after 2 more rounds of hard fighting, with both sides losing their respective bodyguards, Marnius was the last one standing in the center of the board, with a nice score of 69 to 49. Just like my first game, my opponent was awesome. Martin was genuinely a great guy to play against, and his Inquisitor Draxus was sick as hell, taking out 3 Centurions in 1 shooting phase, all on her own. So she was definitely the MVP of our game. But we are 2 wins in now, and I'm feeling on top of the world! What's next for me? Well, that's it for me. Okay, so for those that don't know, Chaos was the clear meta army for the end of 10th edition, thanks to these annoying bastards. Defilers. Defilers, even at the start of 11th edition, are kinda busted to hell. They have tons of guns, amazing melee, and are extremely tough and have the ability to get both lethal and sustained hits while re-rolling hit and wound rolls. Stack that on top of the Pack-Pound Zealots detachment, where you can give them the Mark of Nurgle, which gives them sustained hits on 5s instead of 6s, and the ability to just turn one of the marked units invisible during your opponent's shooting phase. It's no wonder these things got Chaos into the top 8. My opponent was obviously running the Pack-Bound detachment, with Abaddon the Despoiler, Vashdor, Cypher, a Lord Discordant, 2 Cultist mobs, a Chaos Rhino, 2 Chaos Biker squads, 2 Chosen squads, 2 Defilers, the Masters of the Maelstrom without Huron, and a squad of Red Corsair Raiders. This was the meta army, barring Vastor's inclusion. The mission was terraforming, but it really didn't matter, because this game lasted a total of 2 turns. If I moved anything, the Defilers murdered them. All my tanks were destroyed in 2 turns, with Abaddon and the other Chosen squads cleaning up any and all of my infantry. It wasn't even a contest, and the game ended with a score of 88-25. My opponent Nathan felt awful during the whole game for the one-sided smackdown. However, I want to make it clear. This is a Warhammer Open. If you are here to win, you are here to win. That in and of itself isn't toxic or bad. It's also not his fault that I wasn't able to practice against Defilers. The things are sold out everywhere, and if you live in a town where no one has them, it makes it harder to plan around them. As well, Nathan was just a sweet dude. We had a laugh together about it, and the guy came 3rd overall in the tournament. I wish he came first, because then I could say I lost to first place. But hey, beggars can't be choosers. But this was the end of day 1, and I had a total of 161 points at the end of it. A great first day. After that, our friends took us to a traditional Japanese restaurant in Edmonton. I tried some new food, and then we got back to the shitty Airbnb we were staying at. And then we went into day 2. Oh boy, the Imperial Guard! But not just any Imperial Guard. This beautiful bastard made his entire army based off the Tanith First and Only, which is immediate respect for you, sir. His army ran the Grizzled Company detachment, with Gaunt's Ghosts, a Cadian command squad, Lord Solar Leontis, 3 Cadian shock troop units, 2 Catachan jungle fighter squads, a Tower Ox with a full unit of Karskins, 2 Attilan Rough Rider squads, a Cadian recon squad, a Leman Russ exterminator, 2 Leman Russ vanquishers, and 2 Rogaldorn tanks. A beefy armored list with infantry support. Mission 4 was Linchpin, where you score 3 points for holding your home objective and score an additional 5 points for each objective you control outside of your deployment zone. This match was rough, because my opponent got the first turn and drove his Tower Rocks right into my line, nearly blowing up the Crusader in one volley. However, when it got to my turn, I retaliated fast, hosing down the Karskins with bolter fire and Titus's unit piling out, redeeming themselves quickly for the past 3 games by wiping out Gaunt's Ghosts and a Rough Rider unit.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. It bothers me. It bothers me a lot.
The game was a constant back and forth. He would kill a tank or a whole unit, and I would take 2 in retribution. We were also both drawing pretty frustrating secondary objectives, either just not being able to complete any of them or scoring the bare minimum. The problem came down to me losing steam near the end of the game, with most of my units dead, while his units were too far away or injured to do anything else. However, what stopped him from winning the game was my Crusader, which was holding on with 2 wounds in the center of the field, getting blown up. It took the last Recon Cadian with it, which denied him some extra points, and with my Incursors and Centurions surviving some horrific beatings. The game ended with points at 67-59 in my favor. An extremely close game that could have swung either way if either of us had drawn better secondaries. Bruce was extremely fun to play against, and we both got a laugh when we figured out we both just quote Dawn of War Imperial Guard when playing with them. He checked up on me later in the tournament, and that's something fun at Opens and tournaments, when your opponents check in on you whether you win or lose to see how you're doing. Now, on to Game 5. Oh god, please don't be a piece of shit. Please don't be a piece of shit. Oh, thank God he's a cool dude as well. Now, I do go into these games by telling my opponent I am making a video, and if they don't want me to mention their name, I fully respect that decision. This opponent didn't want to be named, so we're just going to refer to him as Cedric for the sake of this. We were offered to go onto the Warhammer stream. But the con was packed, and my opponent got stuck in the crowd, meaning we couldn't make the time to be on the stream. Cut again! My opponent felt extremely bad that I couldn't get onto it, but hey, such is life. Cedric was running the Bastion Task Force, with High Marshal Helbrecht, the Emperor's Champion, Grimaldus, a Castellan, a Judicar with the Blade of Valor enhancement, a Marshal, 2 Assault Intercessor squads, 2 Crusader squads, an Impulsor, an Infiltrator squad, 2 Repulsor Executioners, a Scout squad, a Sword Brethren squad, and a Calidus Assassin. Mission 5 was a much simpler mission. Take and hold. You score 5 points for each objective you control. Now, I was pretty tired already going into this game due to the nature of the con and how crowded it was, so my brain was treating this like I was fighting Custodes again, which I very much wasn't. My opponent left the middle of the board pretty much vacant the whole game, moving his executioners to puppy guard it, while his horde of screaming zealots flooded both the left and right sides of the map. I was barely able to hold out, and after my Crusader got destroyed by the Champions unit, I got bad tunnel vision. You see, I drew the secondary objective, Assassinate, meaning I would score 5 victory points for killing a character. Grimaldus, the Marshal, and the Emperor's Champion were still hanging out over here, so my brain targeted the guy who had taken the most damage thus far, which was the Champion. This actually cost me the game. Sure, I killed the Champion, but the other intercessors weren't able to hurt Grimaldus or the Marshal, which I then learned to my horror why I should have left the Champion alone and gone for this asshole. In my town, only one person plays Black Templars, and due to life stuff, he doesn't play much anymore outside of his friends' places. So I never knew this going into it, but this Marshal, he's a beast. Activating the Light of Vengeance stratagem, he got sustained hits 1 and lethal hits, along with the Castellan giving him rerolls and crit rolls on 5s. This led to this single fucking guy getting 24 wounds in on Titus's unit, clearing my entire right flank with one guy. He quickly overwhelmed the rest of my army. He also kept my Centurions and Scepters spaced out until turn 3, which at that point, there wasn't much I could do anymore. I just focused on trying to score what I could, but it was pretty much over. 64-89, a victory for the Black Templars. Cedric was a very understanding dude, and he told me he had only been playing for a year, which this guy should be proud, honestly. A year in and he's still doing this well at a tournament? He did great. And although I realized my errors immediately, mistakes happened and there was no way for me to know. I was studying for bigger threats, not a niche list. But still, it was a fun game, and you always learn from your losses. So, to be frank, this many games of 40k was taking its toll on me. I was tired, exhausted, and my throat was hurting from all the talking. So this is where I was making more and more mistakes. I also had to keep apologizing to my opponents from here on in, because being so exhausted, my tone and appearance made it sound like I was miserable. I wasn't, but I was self-conscious about it. However, my opponent Jimmy was a super kind and patient guy, and just happy we were playing a match due to his last one being cut short because his opponent got upset and refused to play it out. The Imperial Knights he brought were the Valor Strike Lance, with the army running a Knight Castellan, a Knight Crusader, a Knight Destrier, a Knight Warden, 3 Armiger Warglaves, and 1 Helvrain. This list hits pretty hard, but my army was built to handle it. The 6th mission was linchpin again. Here, my opponent went first and made several mistakes to start out. He was being extremely aggressive, which allowed me to kill his Knight Crusader in the first round. And then shortly after, I killed his Warden and an Armiger, and Marneus and his remaining Vitrix Guard killed the Knight Castellan, while Titus and his squad killed another Armiger and tied up another one. However, this is where my dice turned on me, and my mistakes started stacking up. Notably, I wasn't focusing down on one target at a time, which allowed 2 knights to escape death. I also pulled a very dumb move by pulling Titus out of combat with the armor he was holding down, which allowed said armor to kill Titus and my remaining centurions. I know this wasn't very long, but I was exhausted to the point where I wasn't even calculating points properly. Me and my opponent spent time fixing my mistakes, and he was so awesome for being patient with me and trying to make sense of where I messed up. But the points ended up at 69 to 60, with the Imperial Knights winning. Once again, Jimmy was an extremely kind and totally understood where I was at. If I hadn't pulled Titus out of combat, I would have won that game. But it was a simple mistake. And on day 3, me and Jimmy sat together at lunch and chatted. It was nice. Now, on to day 3 after I got some sleep, but was still feeling really exhausted. Holy shit, guys. It's the same Imperial Guard player I fought last year. He didn't recognize me at first, but once my brother pointed out that I was a Thousand Suns player he fought last year, he immediately recognized me. So it was a rematch, and his army was themed as Cadian Karskins, but using the Tempestus Scions datasheets. It was awesome to see his customized army again. His army was Grizzled Company as well, but it ran Commissar Yarrick, Gaunt's Ghosts, Ursula Creed, Lord Solar Leontis, Commissar Graves, Nork Deadog, an Orgrim bodyguard, 3 Militarum Tempestus command squads, a squad of Cadian shock troopers, a Cadian recon team, 2 artillery teams, a Catachan heavy weapons squad, a Death Rider squad, 3 Tempestus Scion squads, and a Calidus assassin. This time, I went first. And again, I misplayed with Titus and the Crusader. I moved way too far up, which allowed Yarrick and Nork to punish me, destroying the Crusader and shutting down Titus and his squad shortly after. Not only that, but I was way too aggressive on the left flank. My Incursor unit got overwhelmed by Graves, and it allowed her to shut down the left side of the table for most of the game. Then, since I was overly aggressive, it allowed a bunch of Scions, Gaunt's Ghosts, and the Assassins to hop into my back line. They quickly took over my deployment zone. Sure, I was hacking away at his army, but it wasn't enough, and the misplays kept stacking up until they fell down hard on me. I was able to pull it back hard near the end, however. Marnius and his Victrix Guard burned their way through most of his characters and back line. While I managed to get a hold on the left flank again, it was far too late for that to matter. The Guard had claimed too much and had taken too many objectives. Just enough to take a massive jump by the end of the game, leaving me with 77 points and him at 90. A total payback for me tabling him in the last tournament. It was a brutal fistfight of a game, and sadly, I just went too hard, too fast. Reflecting on it, I should have just played like a rubber band, forced him to come to me, then bounced back and shattered his front line. But hindsight is 2020, and we both agreed it was a good game. He said he hopes we can meet again in 2027 and have a tiebreaker, which I hope for too. My last game of 10th edition and my final match was against Eldar. More specifically, Eldritch Raiders, painted up like this. So if anything, I already lost in the drip department. My opponent Sarah was running a pretty spiky Eldar army, running Prince Uriel, Fugin, Lycus, an Autarch with a Starglaive and Fusion Gun, an Avatar of Cain, a Corsair Voidsguard squad, 2 Fire Dragon squads, a squad of Rangers, 3 Shining Spear squads, 2 Starfangs, a squad of Swooping Hawks, a Warp Spider squad, and a Wave Serpent. She was running them with the Eldritch Raiders detachment. Also, my opponent was using the Paul is bad at everything objective markers, so I felt the judging stare of a fellow Centurion fan on me the entire time. This was the last game of the weekend, and I kind of feel bad about it. I was so exhausted and tired from the con, the runaround, Everything else, I didn't take many notes on it. This game was taking most of my brain power, trying to make sure the Eldar just couldn't rush onto me and take out more of my powerful units. And once again, I misplayed Titus, literally in turn 1. Titus and his squad wiped out most of the Shining Spears in my left flank, and I didn't move them off that objective through most of the rest of the game. This meant that I had a unit that could be punishing anything the Eldritch Raiders did in the middle of the board that just wasn't doing their job. After all the screw-ups I had made, I guess part of me was just thinking they would get slaughtered again. So I kept them in the back, doing nothing until turn 4. And at that point, it was too late. If I had sent Titus into the middle to take out Uriel and the Avatar of Cain, I actually would have won by denying several key objectives. But I didn't do that. And again, hindsight is 2020. The game ended in 80-85, with Eldar winning and my opponent and I giving a sigh of relief it was over. Sarah, you were a tough fight and a total fucking queen, along with being a saint and helping my exhausted brain remember rules and reminding me of things your units could do. Genuinely, you deserved the win, and I couldn't have asked for a better final game for 10th edition.
Gotta love Edmonton with its lake-like puddles. Woo!
Well, after all that, it was 3 wins and 5 losses, with a total game score of 509 points at the end. This put me in 81st place out of 254 participants? Holy hell, that is far better than last year's placement. Remember that the amount of wins only really matters if you don't lose at all. The second you lose, all that really matters for placing is points. Aside from Game 3, I was constantly keeping my opponent's points close to my own. Something I'm proud of, because it means that even if I lose, I am making 88% of my games a hard fight to win, meaning I have improved as a player. But what matters the most is if I had fun. And I did. I had a lot of fun over the weekend, even if I was exhausted and near dead by the end of it. I loved being there and seeing the passion, drive, and the sexy armies on display. Hell, since my channel exploded with viewership, I even got recognized at the tournament, with plenty of players and fans stopping by to say hi, and one even took a picture of me, which is jarring to me, because I never thought this would happen. A massive leap from last year, where my most popular video was Dead Space 3. Now, it's the Warhammer content I create to help you guys get into the hobby I love. Now that I am back and have had a week break, we're getting back on schedule. The next video will be how to play Warhammer 11th edition. Then after that, it'll be need to know Gene Stealer cults, need to know Adeptus Mechanicus, and from there, I'll do another Patreon poll, which you can vote on by joining the Patreon. Not only that, but you will get to see some exclusive new series over there soon enough. But until then, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Please like the video, share it around with your friends, and subscribe. And until then, my friends, I'll see you all next time.